Hey, I'm Colleen, and I'm going to give you the three basic foundational steps to overcoming alcohol use disorder. Imagine if you could quit drinking because you want to, instead of because alcohol has become a problem. What if, instead of feeling like you have to quit, you feel like you get to quit? You may think, what does it matter? The end result is the same because in the end, I just can't drink. But there's a huge difference between believing that you can't drink and believing that you don't want to drink. There's a huge difference. It's the difference between feeling like you're being left out and worrying about what other people think versus living a self-directed life full of meaning and purpose and feeling like you're your own boss and the director of your own destiny. You know, the seatbelt signs are off and you're free to move about the cabin. And seatbelts are a great way to think about the difference between having to do something and getting to do something. You know, I'm 48 years old, and when I grew up, especially when I was pretty young, seatbelts were kind of optional. My grandma's back seat didn't even have seatbelts. When we got in the car as kids, we'd always ask our mom, do we have to wear our seatbelts? And a lot of times, or sometimes, the answer was, no, we're not getting on the highway. It's going to be fine. And so by the time I got to high school, I still kind of had that belief that seatbelts were optional. And when I started driving, I would choose not to wear it because I was more concerned about what people thought or what I looked like, because I guess somehow seatbelts were not a fashion statement. I have no idea, but I didn't wear them. And as I transitioned into wearing them, it was painful because I had this belief that they should be optional and that cool people didn't really wear seatbelts. You looked cooler if you were just, I don't care, free floating. Also, if you had a cigarette in your hand, that also helped because that was the 80s. But anyway, now seatbelts are law. They're just normal. My kids get in the car and they're drivers now, and the car beeps at them, won't even let them keep going if they're not wearing them. Now I get in the car and I'm grateful for my seatbelt. If I get in a car and somebody's seatbelt doesn't work, I'm like, can the car still go? I mean, it's a thing because I think that seatbelts are smart and protective and safe. I just don't think about it. They're automatic. It's just a habit. And so that analogy kind of lends itself to understanding how the way you think about not drinking is also key to whether it's enjoyable or whether it feels restrictive. The real reason that quitting feels hard is because you think it's hard. And that's it. I mean, alcohol is a carcinogenic, neurotoxic, depressant drug. There's a 10 out of 10 chance that when you quit drinking, you're going to feel better. So this isn't a drinking issue, it's a thinking issue. So when you decide to quit drinking, or when you're thinking about quitting, you have to also recognize that you must quit thinking like a drinker. If you just quit without changing the way you think, then you're going to be, me in a seatbelt at 16 thinking, my mom's watching and this isn't any fun. And I didn't, embrace the freedom of driving a car. I was much more worried about if the seatbelt looked cool. And that literally is less insane than our beliefs have come to be as a culture with alcohol. When we feel like we have to quit drinking, we take those beliefs into sobriety and we think we have to do it. We're being forced. This is against our will. So we bring up all this resistance. We also feel like that we're quitting and it's a punishment because we weren't able to control ourselves like normal people, which normal's an ideal that doesn't really exist. Looking at everybody's highlight reel with their hands on Facebook does not speak to what their real lives are like. But yet we think it does. There's this belief in our head that if we have to quit drinking, then we're no longer normal. And that aids to our pain and our resistance to quit drinking. We're being kicked out of the reindeer games, and that's no fun. And we feel isolated. And, at least when we're drinking, even alone, we have this belief that other people are drinking. So we're not really alone. Misery loves company. I don't know what it is. But if you take that same belief that other people out there are drinking into sobriety and suddenly you're not drinking, well, I mean, do the fast math there. You're going to feel like you're missing out, like you're not participating, like you're not getting what you deserve. So when you quit drinking, you need a plan, especially if, the major, not so anonymous advertised plan out there is that, there are 12 rules, and you have mandatory adherence to some mass produced identity that you're a recovering alcoholic, and you have to march to this drum and say these words, and follow a group think. And, that kind of, even if ultimately you end up in a AA group and love it and love the people and love working the 12 steps, before you know that you love it, you're looking at it like, that's not something that I want to be forced to do. So you need a plan that feels much more authentic to yourself. If you don't at least eventually design your own plan, you're not going to stick with it because you're living according to somebody else's values. And that's just a recipe for failure. The goal is not to just quit drinking so you can be unhappy in a better way. So my question for you is, do you want to quit drinking because you feel like you want to? Do you want to feel like sobriety is the prize or the punishment? And the difference is made in your head. It's made in your thought process. The reason that quitting drinking is hard is because we think it's hard. Again, there's a 10 out of 10 chance you're going to feel better. But will you be happy? That depends on what you think. Alcohol big alcohol, the culture of alcohol, our social customs with alcohol have brainwashed us. And if we don't address the underlying beliefs such as alcohol is healthy, alcohol helps you sleep, alcohol helps you relax, alcohol reduces stress and anxiety, alcohol is a reward for a good day, you deserve a drink. Alcohol is a reward for a bad day, you deserve a drink. It helps you be more creative. It helps you be more social. It's necessary to drink alcohol if you want to tolerate your mother-in-law and your boss and maybe your spouse and your kids and your life. We think alcohol is necessary to tolerate life. Alcohol has reduced us to the point where we think we have to drink just so we can tolerate things because it's sucked and robbed all the joy, and the natural enthusiasm away from us. And it's convoluted our thought processes. One of the things that we think or we hesitate to quit drinking is because we think that if we quit drinking, other people will think that we have a drinking problem. So we keep drinking to prove that we don't have a drinking problem. Like that makes perfect sense. It doesn't. And once you crack an eyelid to the truth, you'll see that all the stories that we tell ourselves about alcohol have the same ending. It's a trap. But seeing the trap isn't enough because addiction isn't logical. It hijacks our emotional intelligence and our executive function. Have you ever poured yourself a drink when you really didn't want one? You've made the decision not today. You've got a bunch of rational reasons and justifications why it's not a good idea, and you've made the decision not to drink and you're determined to not drink. And then you do it anyway? It's a trap. It's called alcohol use disorder. When your use is disordered, you're not using it as you want to. You're drinking more than you want to, and your shut-off switch or your turn-off switch is malfunctioning. It's alcohol use disorder. But I have good news. There is a way out of it, and I promised to share these 3 steps that I've identified as the basic key ingredients to beginning the journey to overcome alcohol use disorder. Number 1 is to talk to somebody. So much of this is going on inside your head. When you bring it out of your mouth and tell someone the truth, in that moment, you're no longer hiding. You're real, you're you, and you're not alone. that incessant badgering that's constantly going on in your head. You wake up to the shrew that's like, you suck and you drank too much and what did you do last night and go check your texts and you're hungover and this feels horrible and you suck again. And then that same shrew in your head, at 5 o'clock is like, I think you nailed it today. Nailed it. Let's go ahead and pour a drink. So that constant back and forth, quit, drink. Once you give it voice, it at least temporarily, momentarily quiets the chaos and you're no longer alone. And because of all that noise in your head, you don't even realize how isolated you're becoming because you're up here instead of living in the present moment and in reality and connecting with other people. It's all about that connection that alcohol's costing you. In order to stay connected with alcohol, you have to disconnect from yourself, from the present moment, and from the people around you. My first phone call was to an AA hotline. It was just one day and I was like, I impulsively, thank God, we're impulsive when we're drinkers. I was impulsive and I dialed the phone and I talked to somebody and it was an AA hotline. And ultimately, I decided that the AA philosophy wasn't for me. But day one, a real voice, a person who empathized with what I was going through and just let me know I wasn't alone and gave me some solid, marching orders of what to do in this hour and the next hour. It's powerful to tell your story and be heard. And you don't have to call a hotline. Maybe you have a friend or a family member that you can trust, but it has to be somebody that you can open up to. You have to tell someone your truth, the whole truth, the real truth. And then the relief that you'll feel from getting that off of your chest will move you to step 2. And step 2 is you need to make the decision to quit drinking for a specific amount of time. It does not, probably should not, be never, because that just brings in all of this resistance. And well, if I'm never drinking again, I better have one more. The word never is not a good one to bring in. I don't even say I will never drink again. I just say, like, why would I do that? And you can get there. But for now, you need to make a commitment to a certain period of time. Keep in mind that it takes 10 days for all the alcohol to get out of your system. So you don't really even have an experience of authentic, clarity for, at least 10 days. And that doesn't mean that you don't feel better and better and better every single day. It's just that you aren't completely clear of alcohol. When my clients come into my 12-week masterclass in the sober mindset, they commit to 3 months. And that's a really nice time frame, 90 days. Especially by asking me to provide them with accountability, guidance, support, empathy, connection. They feel like they can go maybe a little bit longer. You may be wondering, okay, if I want to try this by myself, where do I start? 30 days is reasonable. Because just like when you're drinking and one glass of wine orders the second, and for sure the fifth orders the sixth, 1 month of sobriety orders another month. And 3 months of sobriety, by the time my clients leave my program, they're ready to commit to a full year. And it just helps them move the ball incrementally. And it's taking it little steps at a time instead of, welcome to day 1, you're never drinking again. That's a mental obstacle that you just don't need to put in front of yourself. Choose a reasonable time frame, make the decision, and jump in with both feet. And then step 3, what do you do once you get into the pool? Both feet, you're all wet. What are you doing? And it's called immersion. When you are drinking, you are spending so much time either recovering from drinking, first part of the day, thinking about drinking, last night, tonight, planning for drinking, talking about drinking. And then once you start drinking, you're actually drinking. You don't even realize how much bandwidth the alcohol trap program is running. And so when you quit drinking, that leaves a huge void. And you don't want to leave your brain unattended. It doesn't know what to think about. It doesn't know what to do. So you have to feed it, food for thought. You have to nourish your mind with good information. And so what I do with clients in my program is from day one, they are listening, podcasts, books on Audible, interviews. They are reading, my information and my modules. They're watching, they're talking with me, with others. They're journaling. They're busy. I keep everybody very, very busy. The earlier you are in from quitting drinking, the more busy you want to stay focusing on the positive points of sobriety, so that in a whole day where you're not feeling perky and you're not feeling like, wait a minute, where's the unicorns and rainbows, I just quit drinking 2 days ago. You're prepared for the process and what it feels like, and you're able to notice what good things are happening instead of focusing on what you're missing out on. So it's very, very important to give yourself the information and the motivation and the inspiration and the connection. So you have to immerse yourself in the sober mindset. Like I talked about before, alcohol has brainwashed us. It's healthy, it's fun, it's social, it's relaxing, and you have to undo all of that one thought at a time. It's not magic. It's very doable, but there's no magic wand. In the early days, it does help to follow someone else's plan. I followed AA's plan for 2 weeks, and it just got me far enough to where then I had the bandwidth to open my eyes and decide what was next for me, decide what I needed, decided what I wanted to believe and how I wanted to move throughout the world as a non-drinker. So immersing yourself in all the options is really, really helpful. I love listening to books or interviews with people who are, hardcore AA or even moderate, sober curious people. There's a whole spectrum out there that you're probably not aware of, honestly, because you're blocking it out. Sobriety is the new black. All the cool kids are now doing this because, alcohol is a toxic, poisonous substance that has zero benefits, zero. And the more people are realizing that, especially post-COVID, where all the social drinkers ended up staying home and becoming isolated drinkers, and that's a really slippery downhill slide, as you may know from watching this video. It's so helpful to see all the people out there and all the different ways they're achieving their own version of recovery. So I really encourage you to take these 3 steps. How do you quit or how do you recover from alcohol use disorder because you want to, not because you're being forced to? Number 1, talk to somebody. You'll just be amazed at how good it feels to feel seen and heard and understood, even if they have no plan for you. Just feeling heard is important. Step 2, make a decision to quit drinking for a reasonable time. And then step 3, once you make that decision, immerse yourself in the vast amounts of social and support out there in terms of social media accounts and Facebook groups and Quit Lit. That's books written by people who have quit drinking. Some of them are celebrities, some of them are better than others. It doesn't matter. Read, listen, podcasts. There's so many good podcasts. There's programs and coaches. Just immerse yourself in all of the options, and then slowly, as your brain detoxes from alcohol, you're going to feel so much better. I know this is a lot to think about, but I also know that the longer you think, the worse you feel. Take action. And if the only action you do right now is join my Facebook group, I have a private Facebook group called Normalize Sobriety. I post lots of inspiration and education and motivation, and everybody in there is in there for the same reason. So jump on into that. If you want to have your conversation with me, I do 1-hour phone calls for free and help you figure out what's going on, where you're at, and where you need to go, and how to make a reasonable plan. So feel free, I'll put the link to that in the second comment below. So just do something, and just know that, I'm more surprised than anybody that I went from a drinker and all of my beliefs to I love my life and I party like a badass non-drinker, and I don't miss it, I don't want it, and it's just pure and complete freedom, and it's available. You just got to put down your drink. So good luck.